We don't fall in love. We fall into roles, into needs, into unconscious bargains dressed as romance. If you think love is something that simply happens when the right person appears, you've already misunderstood it. Most relationships have nothing to do with love. They are transactions, emotional contracts forged between two people who hope to be saved without having to admit they're drowning. Eric Fromm warned us, modern love is not real love. It is mutual manipulation, a deal disguised as devotion. But no one calls it that. We say we're dating. We say it's going well. We say we're building something together. But what we're actually doing is trading. Trading attention for approval, sex for validation, companionship for distraction. We're not falling into anything real. We're entering a silent negotiation. You give me the illusion that I matter. I'll give you the version of myself you're most likely to accept. This isn't cynicism. It's clarity. And it's the only way to make sense of why so many people feel emptier in relationships than when they were alone. Fromm understood that in a culture shaped by capitalism, even love cannot escape the logic of the marketplace. We approach others the way we approach job interviews. Present your best self. Don't say too much. Don't want too much. Be impressive, not vulnerable. Be agreeable, not honest. Hide your needs until they explode. It's no accident. We were taught to do this. Taught that love is something you earn, something you secure through performance. And the moment you stop performing, the moment you relax into your truth, you feel it. The shift, the distance, the subtle punishment for no longer being convenient. So you adapt. You shrink. You betray what you feel just to keep what you have. That's not love. That's survival. And yet, this is normal now. Almost everyone you know is doing it. Scroll through dating profiles. It's not connection you see, it's advertising. Bodies on sale. Curated interests. Staged smiles. Bios written not to reveal who we are, but to attract who we think we deserve. We aren't looking for someone to know us. We're looking for someone to choose us, to validate our existence, to prove we are still desirable in a world that feeds on rejection. And when we find them, what happens? We cling. We compromise. We censor. We convince ourselves that being chosen is the same as being loved. But they are not the same. To be chosen is to fit. To be loved is to be seen and allowed. Love, real love, begins where performance ends. But most people never get there. Fromm wrote that love is not a feeling you fall into. It is an art you practice. It requires freedom and it requires maturity. But we don't teach people how to love. We teach them how to please. And so our relationships reflect that. We are so desperate not to be alone that we will become anything to avoid it. And when the other person does the same, what you get is not love. It's collusion. Two people pretending. Two people terrified. Two people smiling and nodding and wondering silently, do they really know me? The answer is no, because you've never shown yourself. But here's the deeper truth. You don't even know what your real self is anymore. You've hidden it so long, edited it so ruthlessly, that all that remains are fragments, moods, instincts, brief flares of truth you quickly suppress. You've trained yourself out of your own authenticity. You've adapted to survive. And it worked. You got the relationship. You got the ring. You got the approval of others. But what did it cost? Here is the crisis Fromm saw clearly. Modern humans want love without giving up control. We want connection without vulnerability. Intimacy without risk. So we enter agreements. I'll be what you need if you give me what I want. But love is not built on agreement. It is built on exposure. To love is to risk being seen entirely, with your need, your fear, your hunger, your shame. Not polished, not packaged, but raw. And very few people are willing to show up like that. Even fewer are willing to stay when someone else does. We say we want authenticity, but we don't. Authenticity is inconvenient. It's not always sexy. It doesn't come with filters. It interrupts. It cries at the wrong time. It says no when you expect yes. It brings your illusions crashing down. That's why most love dies the moment it becomes real. We don't leave people because they change. We leave them because they stop fulfilling the fantasy. And without the fantasy, we don't know what to do. Fromm believed that love is a discipline, a practice, not the act of finding the right person, but the act of becoming the right self. One who does not love to avoid their own emptiness, but one who has faced it and can now offer more than a plea for rescue. But who teaches us that? No one. Instead, we go on searching, swiping, performing, hoping, bargaining, and we wonder why it never feels enough. Because real love doesn't ask to be earned. It asks to be met. And until you can meet another person without needing to be saved, you are not loving them. You are using them. And when they eventually feel it, they will leave. And you will tell yourself they were never enough. But the truth is, you never stopped bargaining. Most people do not want to be loved. They want to be chosen. To be picked out from the crowd, singled out, noticed, desired. It feels like victory. It feels like proof. But what is really being chosen is the version of you that fits into someone else's story. And for most, that's enough. The price of being chosen is rarely questioned, until it becomes unbearable. At first, it feels like a miracle. They want you. They stay. They say the right words, touch you the right way, fill the space that used to ache. You tell yourself this must be love. But the aching never really stopped. It just changed form. Because deep down, a quiet calculation has begun. You know what they like, what they praise, what makes them stay. So you give more of that. And what doesn't fit, your doubts, your rage, your silence, your fears, you slowly remove. Not all at once. Not dramatically. You don't lie. You just adjust. This is not compromise. This is erosion. And one day you look in the mirror and realize you've been sculpted, not by love, but by fear. And no one sculpted you more than yourself. You thought you were connecting. You were conforming. You thought you were growing together. You were disappearing. This is the hidden cruelty of being chosen. You are never chosen for your wholeness. You are chosen for your usefulness. For how well you mirror the other person's fantasy. For how little you threaten their comfort. And because you are terrified of being left, you participate in your own reduction. You stop naming the things that matter. You suppress your boundaries to avoid seeming difficult. You accept less affection, less presence, less truth, just to avoid rupture. And then, when they pull away, because they will, you're left with nothing but the hollow of your own silence. You cannot even say they rejected you, because you never showed them who you were. You taught them to love your absence. And they did. Fromm knew this game well. He saw how people mistake dependency for love, approval for intimacy, possession for devotion. But real love cannot exist where freedom has been surrendered. It cannot grow in the soil of emotional control. And control is what most relationships become. Subtle, invisible, sacred even, but control nonetheless. You start to measure. How long did it take them to text back? How much attention did they give you this week? Are they as invested as you? You become a quiet accountant of affection, and every smile, every gesture, every kiss becomes part of a running tally. You don't love, you monitor. And if they fail to meet your unspoken needs, you withdraw, not because you want distance, but because it feels safer than asking. Because to ask is to risk. And risk is unbearable when your entire identity is wrapped in whether someone stays. So instead, you play the role. The agreeable one. The cool one. The one who doesn't need much. You pride yourself on being low maintenance, while your unmet needs eat you alive from the inside. This is how love dies. Not through betrayal, not through cruelty, but through the slow suffocation of everything that was once alive in you. And when the relationship finally ends, as it must, you collapse. Not because you lost love, but because you lost the only place where you were pretending not to be lonely. You don't miss the person. You miss the illusion. You miss who you became when you believed you were finally safe. And now, you are alone again. But this time it feels worse. Because now you know what you're capable of giving up. You wonder, is this what love is? Giving away pieces of yourself until someone else decides you're enough? If so, then love is no longer sacred. It's a form of self-harm. But Fromm didn't believe that. He believed that what we call love today is a symptom of a deeper illness, the inability to live without being affirmed by another. We do not love from fullness. We love from deficiency. And until that changes, all our relationships will be echoes of the same quiet desperation. You can change the name, you can change the face, but the story remains. Two people, terrified of not being enough, desperately managing each other's perception, calling it love. And the worst part? No one is lying. Everyone means well. Everyone is trying. But meaning well doesn't stop the rot. Because real love does not ask for sacrifice. It demands truth. And that truth is unbearable for most. It says, "This is who I am. Will you still stay? Not because I've pleased you. Not because I've healed you. Not because I've made myself small enough to fit into your fears. But because I stood before you without armor. And you still reached out your hand. Until that is the standard. You are not being loved. You are being managed. And you are participating in it. Every time you trade your truth for closeness, every time you stay silent to protect the illusion, you are not a victim. You are a co-author. And it's time to ask, what kind of story are you writing? There is a kind of loneliness that doesn't arrive in solitude. It appears in bed, inches away from someone's skin. It comes not in silence, but in laughter. Not in absence, but in presence. You feel it while they're holding you. You feel it when they say, "I love you," and you smile. Because it would be too dangerous not to. This is the loneliness that survives love. And it is the most difficult kind to name. You have done everything right. You were open. You were warm. You gave what was asked. You played the role with grace. And still, something remained untouched. Something deep in you was never found. Never invited. Never truly seen. And you don't know why. You walk through the house you share. You plan the meals. You hold the memories together like glass that's starting to crack. And in the quiet moments, it hits you. You are more alone here than when you were actually alone. Because this performance of intimacy, this ritual of smiling and nodding, of saying "I'm fine" while your insides turn cold, this is a kind of exile, not from someone else, from yourself. And it's not new. You felt it in childhood. You felt it in school. You felt it every time you were told to be easy, polite, modest, contained. Be good, and they'll stay. So you were. You made yourself acceptable, digestible, simple. But the parts of you that weren't, the wildness, the rage, the longing, the grief, those had to go. You hid them not because you didn't want to be loved, but because you did. And they rewarded you for it. You became successful. You became liked. You became chosen. And still, the ache remained. That's the part no one talks about. That even when you win, when the relationship lasts, when the family is built, when the Instagram photos look perfect, you can still feel utterly, unspeakably alone. Because what they love is your compromise. What they admire is your ability to hide your fire without making them uncomfortable. And every time you smile through disconnection, every time you turn away from your truth to maintain the peace, you disappear a little more. Fromm called this the pathology of normalcy, a world where everything appears functional on the surface. But underneath, there is a slow, quiet death of the soul. And we all feel it. We feel it in the way we touch without depth, in the way we speak without risk, in the way we stay even when nothing grows anymore. Why? Because staying is safer than facing the void of unmet self, the void of no longer being desired, the void of stepping out of character and watching someone walk away. So we continue. We nod in conversations we don't care about. We kiss without presence. We ask, "How was your day?" knowing the answer will be short, safe, the same. We do not fight. We do not rupture. We keep it calm. We keep it manageable. But inside, the loneliness becomes unbearable. You begin to fantasize not about someone new, but about being known, really known, not adored, not complimented, just recognized. You start to imagine a world where you don't have to explain yourself, where someone sees the contradiction in your eyes and doesn't look away, where you say something difficult and they don't retreat. But even in fantasy, you don't quite believe it's possible. Because for as long as you've lived, you've been loved for the version of you that performs. And now, you don't even know how to show up without a script. You've lived so long pretending not to need anything, that your needs feel like betrayal. You've lived so long hiding your pain, that even kindness makes you suspicious. And you've spent so much time earning love, that the idea of simply receiving it feels unbearable. This is the damage. This is the inheritance of a culture that taught us to be useful before it taught us to be whole, to be liked before we were allowed to be real, to be polite before we were ever truly free. So we become masters of emotional etiquette, experts at tensionless conversation, polished, charming, controlled, and inside, we are starving. Fromm did not write The Art of Loving as a celebration of romantic success. He wrote it as a diagnosis of a society incapable of real connection. Because connection requires rupture. It requires the chaos of truth, the mess of honesty, the fire of being fully alive, even when it's inconvenient. But we were trained to fear that. We were trained to fear ourselves. So we perform love like a ceremony, hoping that if we follow the script long enough, the loneliness will finally disappear. But it doesn't. It just hides. And one day, it will wake you up at 3 a.m. in the arms of someone who doesn't know your name, even if they say it every morning. And you will wonder how it came to this. You don't notice the shift when it first begins. It's too quiet for that. Not a scream, not a collapse, just a pause. A hesitation in your own voice. A moment where you stop mid-sentence and wonder why you're saying what you're saying. And to whom? And for what? It comes slowly, like light leaking through a boarded window. The self you buried, the one you thought had died to keep others comfortable, starts breathing again, faintly, like a whisper through water. You find yourself lying to someone, and for the first time, you catch it. Not because they notice. They never notice. But because something inside you tightens. Not guilt. Not shame. Something else. Disgust. Maybe. Grief. Definitely. You laugh in a room full of people, and the sound of it echoes back strangely. Like it doesn't belong to you. Like it's the laughter of a version you built from survival, not truth. And suddenly, you don't want to hear it anymore. This is how it begins, the inner rebellion. Not with fireworks. With friction. You are tired. But not from working. Not from life. From hiding. There's a weariness that sets in when you've spent years managing your own image. Years calculating what is acceptable. What is lovable. What is too much. You have been so careful, so exquisitely trained in self-erasure that now, when someone asks what you want, you don't know how to answer. You haven't wanted for yourself in years. You've wanted to be wanted. You've wanted to be chosen. But your own desire? It's a room you stopped entering long ago. You keep it locked. You're not even sure where the key is anymore. And then something happens. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe it's just a question you can't pretend to enjoy answering. Maybe it's someone touching you the way you always said was fine, but never really was. Maybe it's a long look in the mirror, and the terrifying recognition that you haven't looked yourself in the eyes for months. Whatever it is, it breaks the surface, and you realize you are not tired of them. You are tired of who you are when you're with them. That's the crack. That's the first rebellion. You don't act on it, not yet. You don't scream or confess or leave. You just notice. And once you notice, really notice, you cannot go back to not knowing. Now, every word feels like glass in your mouth. Every compliment feels rehearsed. Every touch feels like performance art. And beneath the performance, a strange, dangerous feeling begins to grow. I want out. Not out of the relationship. Out of the performance. Out of the habit. Out of the version of you that got you this far but cannot take you any further. And this is where the grief begins. Because that version kept you safe. That version got you love, or something close enough that you convinced yourself it was. That version gave you a place in someone else's arms. But it cost you your own. You feel it in your chest. Like space opening. Like a door you didn't know you had locked is now ajar. And the air inside is different. Fresher. Heavier. You don't know who you'll be when you walk through it. You just know you can't stay here. And it's terrifying, because everything you've built, every friendship, every habit, every love, has been built around the version of you that's now dissolving. You wonder, if I stop being who they expect, who will stay? And the silence that answers is not cruel. It is honest. But within that silence is something you haven't felt in years. Possibility, not happiness, not clarity, not peace, but the wild, unfamiliar possibility that you are still in there, that you are not gone, that the parts of you that were too much, too loud, too sensitive, too demanding are not defects. They are directions. They point to where you lost yourself. And now, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, you want to follow. You don't need to run. You don't need to destroy. You don't need to explain. You just need to stop apologizing for wanting to be real. The mask is cracking, and underneath, there is a face you haven't seen in years. It is not pretty. It is not smooth, but it is yours, and it is waking up. It doesn't happen all at once. You wake up beside someone you once needed like oxygen, and the silence between you feels honest now. Not cruel, not awkward, just honest. The words that used to comfort have become placeholders. The routines, so carefully constructed, now echo like rituals in a chapel no one believes in anymore. And you see it? Finally, the love you built, the one you fought for, the one you bled to preserve, was not yours. It was a replica, a performance of affection, stability, longevity. But it was never a home, not for you. You realize this not in a moment of rage or clarity, but in stillness, in the small, heavy ache of knowing you can't go back to pretending. Not because they changed, not because anything broke, but because the version of you that was willing to trade truth for closeness no longer exists. That's the moment, the end of the beautiful lie. It wasn't a lie you told with malice. You told it with hope, with need. You told it to survive. And for a while, it worked. They stayed. You laughed. You posted pictures. You said the right things and convinced yourself that feeling almost happy was the same as peace. But now you know, it wasn't. It was quiet control. It was mutual managing. It was two people keeping each other from drowning while never learning how to swim. And that knowing, it breaks something in you. Not dramatically, not with shouting or ultimatums. Just a slow, inner exhale. A collapse. Because it was never them. It was you. You were the one who silenced yourself. You were the one who stayed quiet during the arguments, said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. You taught them how to treat you. You trained them to love your mask. And now that the mask is slipping, they look confused. Or worse, disappointed. You think about all the little betrayals. The times you swallowed your boundaries. The moments you laughed at things that made you uncomfortable. The nights you touched them out of duty, not desire. The years you spent being small so the relationship could feel big. And now, what's left? You're still here. They're still here. But you are no longer holding hands. You are holding an agreement. One you no longer believe in. You wonder if you ever really did. Fromm once wrote that most people confuse the intensity of falling in love with the capacity to love. But real love isn't fireworks. It's not addiction. It's not possession or praise. It's presence. It's depth. It's the quiet miracle of being seen and still chosen. But that didn't happen here. You weren't seen. You were selected. For your patience. For your beauty. For your ease. For the way you fit into someone else's fantasy. And now that you're waking up, they are not celebrating. They're retreating. Because the truth of you is not what they wanted. And that hurts. More than you imagined it would. You want to rage. You want to cry. But what comes instead is grief. Not for them. For you. For the years. For the loneliness you denied. For the joy you postponed. For the voice you buried so you wouldn't seem too much. You miss yourself. And that missing becomes a vow. Never again. Never again will you pretend to be less just to be loved. Never again will you trade authenticity for proximity. Never again will you confuse being chosen with being cherished. But for now, there is mourning. A kind of death. Not of the relationship, but of the story you told to keep yourself from breaking. And it does break you, in a way. It empties you out. It leaves you quiet, unanchored, uncertain. You don't know who you are without the performance. You don't know what love will look like without the script, but you're willing to find out. Because the cost of staying in a beautiful lie is too high for a soul that has remembered its voice. And once remembered, it cannot be silenced again. Not for anyone, not even for the one you thought would save you. You will walk out of this, not with anger, but with the deep, slow ache of rebirth. You will not burn the house down. You will simply leave the door open and start walking toward nothing, toward no one, just away from the person you had to become in order to be loved by someone who never really knew you. When all of it falls away, the masks, the performances, the bargains spoken and unspoken, you are left with something unfamiliar. Not peace, not certainty, but space. You wake up and the world feels quieter, not because it changed, but because you stopped trying to bend it into love. There is no applause for this moment. No one thanks you for walking away from the version of yourself that kept everything intact. No one sees the cost of your honesty. No one celebrates the breaking, but something inside you is gone still. Not numb, not cold. Still, you notice things differently now. A glass of water becomes an act of listening. A long walk without explanation feels sacred. You're no longer performing your life for someone else's comfort. You're just here, breathing in a body you've returned to, breathing in a self you no longer owe to anyone. And you don't need it to be dramatic anymore. You don't need someone to witness the transformation, because it's not transformation. It's return. You were never lost, just buried beneath what you thought love required. Now, you find yourself drawn to silence. You let it stretch between you and others, not as a threat, but as a welcome. The kind of silence that doesn't demand filling. The kind that allows you to feel the shape of your own presence again. You meet people now without needing to be adored. You say what you feel without checking their face for permission. You stop turning yourself into something useful. You stop being manageable. There is grief in this freedom, a kind of aloneness that is deeper than loneliness. But it is clean. It does not rot. It does not feed on your dignity. You carry it with you like weather. A quiet ache that reminds you what it means to finally be real. You realize how rare it is, this kind of honesty. How uncomfortable it makes others. How often they will try to pull you back. Into the role. Into the shape they once loved. Into the version of you that didn't make them think about themselves. And you let them try, but you do not return. Because you have learned the difference between being loved for your obedience and being loved for your aliveness. One makes you smaller. The other makes you whole. And wholeness is not soft. It is not easy to hold. It is jagged, wild, unfinished. But it is yours. That is what remains when the illusions fall. Not perfection, not confidence, but presence. You stop looking for someone to complete you. You stop believing that being desired is the same as being seen. You stop apologizing for the hunger in your voice. And instead of asking, "Will you stay if I show you who I am?" you begin to ask, "Why should I hide in order to be kept?" You are no longer a mirror. You are no longer a refuge for someone else's denial. You are no longer a performer hoping the right role will bring you safety. Now, you are a landscape, a body of memory, a voice that knows silence is not the absence of connection, but the space in which it can finally breathe. You don't need to prove your worth anymore. You don't need to win affection like a prize. You don't need to chase closeness that disappears when you stop performing. You only need to be. That, for might say, is the beginning of love. Not the desperate reaching. Not the quiet begging behind your smile. Not the compromise so deep it becomes invisible. But the presence of two whole people. Unafraid to be seen. Unwilling to disappear. And even if no one joins you there, you will have already won. Because the love you wanted from others was never about them. It was the echo of your own voice, calling out from the places you abandoned. Now, that voice has come home, and it does not need to be loud. It only needs to be true.